Well, actually, two of them, Market Square Arena and the old Chicago Stadium.
And the old Chicago. Yeah, I mean, it's different when you don't have Jordan, I guess, right?
Yeah.
All right, I think we are live. Jamal is here. Joe was on his way. For some reason, it's not. Are we not pushing it? Oh, here we go. All right, I'm gonna push that there. Push that there. We are live. I put the countdown 1 second. We got new technology here at Midweek Midrange. So ready and
Okay.
And we are live. We're still waiting on Joe for a second. We got Jamal here. Jamal, how you doing tonight, man?
No, I'm doing great. Just glad to be here.
Good deal. So, welcome back to Midweek Midrange. My name is Parker Ainsworth. I'm joined by Jamal Simmons, and we're waiting on Joe Palencia, who is having a little bit of technical difficulty, I think, but he is on his way back. And tonight we're going to start off with the live national game because, quite frankly, oh wait, is that Joe? I'll give him 1 second. But the live national game is Nets Pelicans, which is mostly interesting because of a guy off the bench, which I wouldn't have thought we'd ever call this guy a guy off the bench. But first of all, let's welcome back Joe. So we're gonna set stuff back up. But welcome back, Joe. How you doing, bud? Doing okay, Joe? Anyway, so we're back to the Nets and the Pelicans. And Jamal, you said you got to watch Durant's return a little bit.
Yeah, doing great.
I got to be honest. I first saw that he was going to be starting, and then saw that he was going to be coming in off the bench, and I was like, "What's going on? Is he really back?" And then he looked like he was really back, huh?
Yeah, I mean the man looks like he hasn't even lost a step. Like he haven't even had the Achilles injury or the hamstring problem. He looks like he's the Durant of old. So it's easily one of the best freaks of nature in basketball that I've seen in quite some time.
Completely. Well, and the truth is that we were talking off pod. Like, man, if I could get whatever he's got going on in my knees, that would be epic. Joe, are you there with us, buddy? All right, we're still waiting to see if Joe's connection's working. I'm intrigued though, because tonight, Joe, you're laughing. Can you hear me but can't say anything? Anyway, tonight we're looking at Durant coming back from injury. The Nets.
Yeah, I'm here. I don't know. if
No, I got you.
my Wi-Fi might be.
No, it's all good. Did you get to watch any Durant coming back tonight? Oh, just kidding. And we're back. No, but the interesting thing I think is that so they're welcoming Durant back shortly after they've now had to James Harden's on the shelf for 10 days. Now it's a hamstring, so it might really be 10 days, but the hamstring it also might be 4 weeks. You don't really know with those kind of things. And the Nets are certainly not the only team to come down with these. So Jamal, as you look at it, what's your take on the injuries thus far in the first, we'll say 2/3, maybe 3/4 of the NBA season? Are you seeing like really big ones at play? Is there anything that sticks out to you? What are you thinking?
I mean, look no further what's happened in the West when you have LeBron James and Anthony Davis both out for a significant period of time. And look at where the Lakers have fallen since then. Because if I'm not mistaken, you want to say a month, maybe 2 months ago, they were like at the second or third seed in the West. Now they're in danger of falling into the play-in tournament. So the Lakers and their fans have to hope that those two come back and have enough time to get ready, because most of the other teams that you see in the West, they're really starting to pick up their game. You have the Clippers starting around in the form. Denver made the huge trade that's paying dividends, and of course Utah and Phoenix are still doing their thing. So the Lakers have to be really concerned about where they are right now. And if their stars don't come back fully healthy, I honestly don't think they can even get out of the first round.
Well, and so it's interesting to say that because I feel like as I look at the way teams handle the regular season, a team like the Lakers is going to handle the regular season different than a team like the Mavs. And that's not, I don't mean that to select the Mavs. I mean, like the players on the team are just at different places, right? So like Davis, the Lakers, LeBron, they won a ring a year ago. Their goal is be healthy when best of 7 starts, right? The Mavs got bounced in the first round last year, right? They didn't make the playoffs the year before in Luka's rookie year. And so their goal is like work their way up the seeding, get a good seed, get out of the first round and so on, right? And so it's interesting because I think the Lakers really do genuinely feel like they can even be the 5th seed they are right now if they're healthy when the playoffs start. I don't know necessarily if that's the truth, but that's the way they got to feel, right? Whereas like the Mavericks want to climb these standings. The Blazers want to climb these standings. Some of these other injuries are on those other kinds of teams, right? Like you have Steph hurting his tailbone. Well, as weird as it is to say, like the Warriors are fighting for every win to kind of get into that play-in tournament right now. And Steph missing all that time really hurt. Do you see, obviously LeBron and AD are very separate categories. They're both top 5-ish players in the NBA, right? And they're both on a contender. They just won it all, etc. Are you seeing any injuries on maybe teams that aren't taking the regular season off?
Well, it's kind of hard to tell because I know there are a lot of I won't say like big names, but definitely some other names to like to keep in mind. So I know one that was really interesting for me to watch was Philadelphia's situation with Joel Embiid, because I know when he went down, Philadelphia, honestly, they really didn't miss too much of a beat. They really just kept rolling, even though it's kind of fallen off a little bit. But you see how much of a difference he makes for Philadelphia, not just offensively, but defensively as well. There's a reason why he was the MVP candidate for a good portion of the season. So that was a main injury for me to watch. So it's like, okay, if Philadelphia can just weather this storm and really just try to keep pace with Brooklyn and Milwaukee, Philadelphia was going to be just fine.
Joe, are you with us? Can you hear me? Kind of. Maybe I might have just got him at just the wrong time because I thought he would listen. No, I think that Joel Embiid is an interesting one because it certainly looked catastrophic when it happened. I was glad to see it was just a hyperextension. And like you're saying, whether it's Ben Simmons playing like Defensive Player of the Year, or if it's, a host of shooters around him, or it's just Doc being Doc, something's working out there where they didn't seem to miss much of a beat. Mm-hmm. I also think it's interesting. So this expedited 72 games in a short amount of time, shorter offseason, all those things we heard about before the season started. We've also seen a lot of these, like, I don't want to say smaller guys because I don't want to diminish the guys, but they're not all NBA type performers yet, right? Like Spencer Dinwiddie got hurt early. Christian Wood's ankle has been a nuisance, right? Serge Ibaka's got back problems. We saw CJ McCollum and his foot injury, I believe, missed a chunk of time. He was playing great when it happened, right? Would you see any of those? I don't want to say smaller players because, frankly, some of them are big guys like Ibaka, and some of them are also big guys for their team and their role. But do you see any of these, next tier of guys injuries along the way?
Yes, as a matter of fact, that CJ McCollum injury, I honestly thought, well, him and Nurkic, when those two went down, I thought Portland's season was going to be sunk. Because you honestly cannot tell me to expect Damian Lillard to really carry the load for that team. And even with an aging Melo, like you just cannot expect them to really stay competitive in the West. But boy, did they prove me wrong. Not only Damian Lillard has carried the load, he is really, at least to me, top 3 MVP with the way he's playing right now. So it's like, if I had to pick the top maybe 3 or 4 guys, he would be in that category with Jokic and Giannis as well. I throw Harden in there too, but with him, I can't put him maybe above 4 because come on, you're playing with KD and Kyrie for guys.
Well, it's funny you say you can't put him above 4. We'll talk MVPs in a second. So the year of the injury is what I hope this goes away real fast, right? I hope we get to a point where like LeBron and AD come back in the next month. that James Harden's just a 10-day thing, that Steph has no lingering tailbone things, that these things go away, because it would be there's an injury or some sort of an asterisk, if you want to call an injury an asterisk, on like every season, right? Like the 2015 Warriors final run, you could talk about the guy like the Kyrie injury in the finals, or Love didn't even get to play in any of the finals games, or you could, frankly, it was a suspension. But the 2016 Cavs finals, right? You could talk about Draymond Green getting suspended. You could put that kind of thing on any year, but it just feels like there's a lot this year. And I guess I hate to think that, like, with so many of those like one-offs in recent history, that this gets written off as a big one, especially because there are people, whether it's because it was harder or easier, giving a big asterisk to the championship we just saw happen.
Right.
I think it's harder to play in a bubble, but they didn't ask me and I'm not playing in it. But do you see any, assuming that these guys come back healthy, right? Because it will really just impact the regular season games at that point, which would impact the seeding. Do you see any long-term issues with this, Jamaal?
I mean, it depends on which team you're referring to. When you're talking about more like a veteran team, it definitely will, because you want to more save those legs. But if you're talking about teams like the younger teams, the Atlantas, the Charlottes, the teams like that, it's not really going to affect them as much, because they're just trying to get their feet wet and see what kind of team they can be, because these are really a lot of young teams that are kind of in that range of 26 and younger type teams. So really, they're just trying to figure out what is their identity. Like the Lakers and the Clippers, they know who they are for the most part. And also, I would throw the Suns in there too. Even though they have Chris Paul and James and Jay Crowder, they still have to figure out who are they as far as the team goes when the playoffs really count, because those are the only two guys on Phoenix's team that have playoff experience.
Well, and I love Chris Paul, right? He has played 5 games post second round, so even his playoff experience is like, he's one of the 2 guys that has done it, and he hasn't played in a bunch of NBA Finals games, right? Like he's in a different boat as well. He's certainly been around the league a long time, playing in important games, and I don't want to diminish like the game winner against San Antonio, or how big he was in those 5 Western Conference games in Houston before going down, right? But it's not like he's got a plethora of playing in June. Well, waiting or working on Joe's internet again. This is just a technical difficulty live show. We're gonna jump into hot tea cold brew now. Now that's hot tea cold brew was a suggestion by a listener, and I think it's interesting because it does have a little bit different vibe. But hot tea cold brew is brought to you by Yeti cups, coolers, and koozies. Yeti is the go-to shop for keeping things hot or cold, just like NBA rumors or news or deadlines, right? And so, that's not what I want. And so with that said, we're going to jump into this and looking at some hot tea and cold brew teams and seeing potentially, where they're ranking. Now, the idea of this is based on that I like Kermit sipping hot tea meme from a while back, where some of these teams may be piping hot, where you kind of give them the side out, like, oh, this is for real, right? Or some of these might be ice cold, like a good cold brew coffee in the morning, needs a little bit of a jolt to wake you up. These Yeti cups, like I got a cold right here and I got a hot tea right here. They can keep things cold for up to 24 hours and hot for 8 or more. So please be sure to go hit the links in our bios and go support our sponsor, Yeti cups, coolers, and koozies. Yeti's built for the wild. And in many ways, so are these teams. We're going to start with the Utah Jazz. Jamaal, as I look at the Utah Jazz, they're on the top of the West. They have been in the playoffs for a few years in a row now. I'll get into the reasons that I think that they're really good in a second. But all those things make you think, man, this ought to be the Vegas favorite. And they're not. And for whatever reason, they seem to be a team that's almost like an afterthought. They don't have an MVP candidate, really. They probably have a Defensive Player of the Year candidate, but I don't know if they give it to Gobert another time. They do, but that'd be 3 in a row, or 3 out of 4, whatever it is. That's a lot. We can talk about Quinn Snyder and Coach of the Year and that kind of stuff. The award they may have locked up is 6th Man of the Year in Jordan Clarkson, right? And so,
no question.
As we look at this, I guess my question is: are the Utah Jazz hot tea or cold brew, because no one's giving them a big chance, but they're running through the league. They've got a ton of wins. So Jamaal, are they hot tea or cold brew?
I think to me it's hot. It's hot tea right now because, as you said, they're the top team in the NBA. They lead. The efficiency that this team has throughout the season is almost mind-boggling. And Steve Kerr said it himself. It kind of reminded him of when Golden State started to make their ascension during 2013 through 15 when they started winning their championships. So yes, I do see some similarities there. But at the same time, you have to look at it as well. What has Utah done when they've gotten to the playoffs? The farthest they've gotten is to the second round, and if they've gotten there, they've bowed out in 5 games to the Houston Rockets in 2018. So really, it's a matter of not just Utah in general, but can Donovan Mitchell, can he take that next step as we saw in his classic duel with Jamal Murray in the bubble? Can he take that next step in order to get Utah over the hump? Because as you know, there's a pretty good chance they're going to run to either the LA teams. They might see Phoenix. And you already know what their sometimes their issues are with Denver. So it's really going to be interesting to see how Utah is going to approach this year's playoffs as opposed to the last couple of years when they're starting to really grow into who they are.
Before we jump to Joe, I want to shout out our commenter first. We got Shaka coming. Shaka is one of my co-hosts on a different show, but Shaka asked, when did I have time to get in an argument with him on Twitter? So if you follow me personally on Twitter, Shaka and I were just arguing about Houston Rockets' ability to pull in free agents. And second, he asked about asterisks, because if you know anything about me, I really hate asterisks. I hope that didn't come off as I want to put an asterisk on the season. So if that's what that was, I really am sorry. And Shaka, way to keep me accountable, because I don't want an asterisk on the season. I'm really hoping we don't have one. Joe, what do you think about, if you can hear me, what do you think about the Utah Jazz? Are they hot tea for real or cold tea not?
So I was thinking about this earlier today, and I like to think of them as kind of like some hot tea with an ice cube. So they're doing really well. They're probably playing the best basketball that they have in recent seasons. They look really exciting to watch. Murray had a little bit of a slow start to the season. As far as my fantasy team goes, but that's another story. But I think that they have the capabilities to make a run. But if the Lakers or Clippers get a better season than the pandemic P playoffs that we had last year, or 9 months ago, whatever it was now, because COVID kind of threw the schedule all over the place. But as long as they're hitting on all cylinders and a couple things go right, I can see Utah making it pretty far.
Well, I would agree on a lot of fronts. I think and the funny thing is, we talk about my co-host from my other show, Shaka, gave me a hard time. He also knows I hate Rudy Gobert. But the thing I think that I will give Utah a lot of credit for is the way they shoot the friggin' basketball. They got 10 guys shooting over 35% from three. They're shooting 39.5% from three as a team. They have the top offense rating in the league and the 4th best defense rating in the league. Obviously, that yields them as the best difference in the league. They're at the top of the Western Conference as it stands now. That means the 8 seed. There's playing games, so it may not shake out like this, but it'll be the Grizzlies. They've had their number all year. The 4 seed, the 4-5 matchup is currently Denver, LA. And I don't mean to like poo-poo on your Nuggets there, Jamaal. The thing that could mess up this whole bracket, including the Jazz, is if the Lakers really are the 5 or 6 seed and then show up healthy for the playoffs. Because
I've seen that too. If you go way back, this is for old school basketball fans, back to 1995, the Houston Rockets were the 6th seed. And when they got healthy and going at the right time, you saw what happened. No one had an answer for the dream. So if the Lakers do that and they're completely healthy, all the top seeds in the West are in trouble.
Well, and so the truth is that that'll change up the whole picture, because right now, if they're in the second round, the Western Conference Finals, the first round, a healthy Lakers team to me will beat the Jazz. And I don't mean that to slight what Donovan Mitchell and Quinn Snyder are doing. That's the defending champ, and they look like before the injuries happened, they were going great. I worry about Davis's injury. I worry about nagging high ankle sprains with LeBron. He isn't a young guy anymore. And frankly, it wouldn't be a big deal if they, made a deep playoff run, didn't win all this year, and came back and won it all next year, right?
Very true.
If they could somehow make it, and this is the dream scenario, if you're the Jazz, if you can get the Lakers to play the Clippers before you have to play either one, because I think they could potentially beat one of them. Having to play them both back to back is part of the grind of the West, and winning 8 games in that 14-game window is a big ask for anyone. It's frankly a big ask for either one of those LA teams too, right?
You're asking a lot from that.
And so that's going to be tough for them. I go back to my big reason that I like the hot tea with an ice cube, Joe. That was a clever reference because I said at the start of the season early when they looked like they were as hot out the gate, and they look a little bit better than that now, obviously, because they maintained it. But my big knock against them is the last 2 or 3 years in a playoff series, around game 2 or 3, the other team makes an adjustment, and they have trouble adapting. The Nuggets went to point Jokic last year and took Jamal Murray off ball and freed him up a lot. They couldn't do anything about it. 2 years ago, Harden turned into a dime distributor kind of guy. They lost in 5 games, right? Like the year before that, when Houston had a healthy, good Chris Paul, they went to were doubling James and all that kind of stuff, and they just let Chris Paul run the show, and he put up 50 and a quarter on those guys, right? Like as a team that obviously the deal was just they had trouble making an adjustment once the other team countered, right? And so I kind of need to see them do that in the first round. I will say getting to play the Grizzlies or Spurs or Warriors or one of these other teams in the first round before you play the Lakers could change my mind, right? Like if they make a good counter in those series, maybe I think they have a better chance, but I just got to see it happen. Speaking of top of the West, one team that, as it currently stands, would not see the Jazz until potentially the Western Conference Finals are the Phoenix Suns. I like a lot of what they're doing. They also, though, unless you're into really dark Chris Paul NBA Twitter, they don't look like they have an MVP candidate. Right, I put air quotes around that because I would argue that a number 2 team in the West, or number 1 team in the West, probably does, but they're not going to get a whole lot of votes for Chris or Book. I don't know that they're going to get a Coach of the Year candidate. They might. I don't know what other awards. I don't know what kind of awards they'll win. But they're sitting there at 2 of the West, and part of that's because they've been healthy all year, or the majority of the year, as have the Jazz. But part of that's also they're playing really good basketball. So, Joe, if you can hear me, do you think the Phoenix Suns are hot tea or cold brew? Joe? I'm going to throw it to Jamal. We're waiting on Joe's audio. Jamal, hot tea, cold brew, Phoenix Suns.
Hot tea. If I'm the other teams in the West right now, this is probably one team I do not want to see.
So, for the appreciation for my comment earlier about the Jazz,
Joe, I'm not trying to cut you off, but Jamal was on a little bit of a roll, so I'm going to let him go. Jamal, what are you going to say about the Suns? You're big on the Suns.
Yes, they are probably one of, if not the hottest team in the NBA right now that I don't think anybody wants to face because you have
but
a bona fide leader.
Think that Phoenix is...
That must be messed up. But no, you have a bona fide leader in Chris Paul who just knows how to get things done and knows how to lead. My worry with him is, can he stay healthy when it matters most? Because when he does, his teams are not only they're in the games, but sometimes it feels like they can take control of games. Because, and especially now that you got stars like Booker, and I think DeAndre Ayton is really starting to come into his own. And then you got wing guys who I think people really need to start paying attention to. And Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson. I love the Jay Crowder pickup. I think that was a very underrated move for them. So And I will say this right now. I think Monty Williams should be coach of the year, and I think James Jones, the executive for the Suns, should be the executive of the year. That's how good and how crazy this rise has been for the Suns. Because I'll tell you this: last year when the Nuggets played the Suns, we played them 4 times. Every single game was close. So it's not like they were blowing them out. And I said that if the Suns could just get like 1 or 2 pieces, not only I think they could make the playoffs, I think they could get the other Western teams in trouble. And you're seeing it right now. Now, when it goes to the playoffs, it's going to be interesting to see what they do because, as I said before, Chris Paul and Jay Crowder are the only 2 guys on that roster who have legitimate playoff experience. So it's going to be interesting to see how they fare when things get really tight.
Yeah, and so I think this deal with the Suns really starts back in the bubble, right? They went 8-0 in the bubble. They didn't make the playoffs, which makes you wonder why they were there in the first place. But they went 8-0 in the bubble. Booker played great, had the big game winner against Clippers, right? And then I'm like you, and then they got better in the offseason. It was an abbreviated offseason. They got better. I like a lot of what they do. I could go on a riff about it in a second, but I'm going to try and let Joe get back in here. Joe, if you can hear me, I'm going to stop for a second, let you talk. But what are your thoughts on the Suns?
I like the Suns. I think they're playing good basketball. I do think that the pieces that they brought in this offseason helped a lot. I like the Chris Paul pickup from day one. He's got a history of making the big men that he plays with better. And I think that the leadership aspect that he brought and brings is something that Phoenix really needed. And you can clearly see that it is helping. They look like a hot team, and they look like Jamaal said, like they're going to give the Western Conference playoffs some problems.
Yeah, I think they're not just – they're a hot team. The Chris Paul pickup's huge. The signings in the offseason across the board are big. I like Sark too. So as I look at them, I think it's interesting because obviously anyone can see the jersey behind me or listen to me on any show I'm on knows that I am a begrudging Houston Rockets fan. I say that because we have 8 years of great basketball, and then this year has been not great. But I look at this team, and I said this early in the season. We can go back and pull up the tape. I think I was on benches and burners, though, because it's before the season started, and this one's not. But I like Chris Paul at point, dominant scoring 2-guard Devin Booker, 3-and-D wing and Mikal Bridges, 3-and-D wing and Cam Johnson or Jay Crowder or whomever. Those guys are all shooting 38% or better from 3. Then you got a rim-running center in DeAndre Ayton. That sounds a lot like Chris Paul, dominant scoring James Harden, Ariza, Tucker, Capella. That team won 65 games. Now, I'm not saying that Devin Booker is James Harden or that Chris Paul is necessarily the same guy he was 2 years ago or that Ayton is the same guy that Capella was. You can pick apart each thing you want to, right? I'm not saying that they are saying it's the same model in a lot of ways, and Chris clearly played well and impacted that. The 2-guard at the time, James, in this instance, Devin Booker, clearly got his shots off and was open a lot the way that Chris Paul sets those guys up, right? It's a good setup. I also like that, unlike that Houston team, when they pull Sark in off the bench to play the small ball 5, I'll say. So I say small ball. He's 6'10". He's just 26 years old, and he shoots the 3 ball at a 35.8, 36% clip, right?
There you go.
That's all. That spaced the floor in a whole different way. So as you're approaching a playoff series, I now, as the opposing coach, have to be ready to, at the substitution mark, flip it in a whole new coverage to make sure I cover him in the corner or on the pick and pop. And then next substitution mark, I got to make sure my backside guys sliding over, cut off the roll on the DeAndre Ayton pick and roll. Like, that's just a lot to prepare for. And I think that is Monty Williams and the GM both working together to be smart. And I think that's also that. I mean, that in itself can make a first-round series very short. And for a guy like Chris Paul, that's going to be important. You alluded to earlier, Jamal, his biggest thing is playing a lot of playoff games healthy. And so if they have that really could help them out. I like them a lot. Again, my thing with them is if they have to run into a healthy Lakers, whatever round that may be, that's going to be tough. But I like them until then, and if they don't have to play a healthy Lakers, I like them a lot. One team that won't have to play healthy Lakers until the finals, if that, are the Milwaukee Bucks. And I say this because I think they're kind of, I hate this phrase slept on, so I'm not going to say slept on. But the Milwaukee Bucks are 32-18. And what I love about watching the Milwaukee Bucks play is they're 32-18, and they're kind of doing different things every couple of nights, mixing things up, trying things out, which is what a team with championship goals ought to be doing. Because the truth is at that point, like, you know what you're doing in the regular season. You're just going to, lobby some playoff spot down the line. 32-18, just 2.5 games out of number 1 overall seed in the Eastern Conference. Obviously, they have Giannis Antetokounmpo, the 2-time MVP, frankly, putting up stats that make you think he maybe ought to get a third, but I doubt he gets a third just on narrative type things. I like the Bucks a lot. There are a lot of people that have trouble putting them in a contender category because of what we've seen from them in the past playoffs. So I'm going to ask. Let's start with Joe. I'm going to pause for a second. But Joe, do you think the Milwaukee Bucks are hot tea or cold brew?
I'm going to go with cold brew on this one. And it's mainly just because of the fact that I have to see it in the playoffs. They're a great team. I'm not taking anything away from them. And the moves that they've made have definitely shown that they're willing to commit to Giannis. And that the extension of Drew Holiday shows that they are willing to commit to this core and are looking to build for those three and Drew. So it'll just be interesting to see what these playoffs play out. I know Drew Holiday has had a good playoff run within the last, I don't know, when was his last good playoff run? When he was with AD, when
he and AD in New Orleans.
In New Orleans.
Yeah, they got the second
that was
round.
A good series for her. Yeah, they were good. But yeah, I just need to see it. That's really it for me. If I can see it in the playoffs, I will eat my words like a steak, medium rare.
Medium rare. So medium rare means it hadn't been cooked a whole lot. So that is kind of cold brew. No, medium rare is a good way to get it. But we will bring you back on to eat those words if Giannis has a Finals MVP. I promise, because you will not be the only one eating it. I don't imagine in the Belly Up crew. Jamaal, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but is Milwaukee a hot tea team or a cold brew team?
Cold brew. And I hate to say it because I've seen Milwaukee sometimes rampage throughout the regular season, just killing teams. But then they get to the playoffs, and then all of a sudden, everything changes. And I thought that their weakest link throughout those last 2 playoff runs was their point guard, Eric Bledsoe, because he is such a streaky shooter. Sometimes he doesn't make the best decisions on the break or whatnot. And I think Milwaukee did the biggest disservice to themselves when they let Malcolm Brogdon go. They never should have done that. And Giannis, yes, he's the MVP and all that the last 2 years, but I need to see it when it matters most. So, and I said for the past couple of years, he needs to get a jump shot or he needs to develop a post game to take his game to the next levels, because that way they won't always build that wall when they're in transition. And if you do post up, accept the double team, you'll get even more threes that way. So really, to me, I do like the Drew Holiday pickup. I think that will be helpful. He's actually a more proven scorer than Bledsoe ever was. And I think he's also a better defender as well. But I'm anxious to see how, because I'm pretty sure there's a good chance they're going to face either Philadelphia or Brooklyn. I'm anxious to see what they do against either one of those 2 teams who are basically just as tall and just as athletic as them.
Yeah, I think what's interesting after the Brooklyn signings, right, is that they can throw very different lineups out against Milwaukee. With the Sixers, if Joel's hitting from outside, I guess they can too, right? Because Ben is a functional, in some ways, big man because he scores that inside, but he's also a playmaker as a perimeter guy. He's a locomotive when he's breaking down the court. But as I look at Milwaukee, I think it's interesting that both of you guys are lower on them than the Jazz, because I probably see them as a very similar team, right? I see both teams as great regular season teams in the last couple of years that have struggled in playoffs. The difference being these guys do have an MVP, right? And that does raise expectations. So obviously that probably hurts them as much as it helps them in the eye of many. They're top 10 offensive and defensive rating, 3rd in pace, which I think is important because I don't know that every Budenholzer team has always been 3rd in pace. I wonder. So PJ hadn't played a lot since he got there. I wonder if they look different with PJ at the 4, Giannis at the 5, and that makes them a little bit faster team. Because as I look at some of the current lineups on basketballreference.com, obviously it's smaller sample sizes because Bryn Forbes doesn't play as much as your more traditional starters. But lineups with Giannis at the 5 and a handful of guards like a Bryn Forbes, like a Dante DiVincenzo, like a Drew Holiday, like a Chris Middleton, are very, very high on the plus minus, right? And it's just 30 minutes, but Giannis, Connaughton, DiVincenzo, Drew, and Chris is a plus 34 on the season, right? And that to me indicates that we might have had Giannis in the wrong position this whole time, right? He might be this rim running 5 that's just a freak of nature and can handle the ball in the open court. I don't know. What I do know is that if I replace Connaughton with PJ in that 5-man lineup, my defense gets better. That plus minus gets better. If I replace, there's another lineup that's plus 30, almost 35, is Giannis, Connaughton, DiVincenzo, Bryn Forbes, and Bobby Portis. Now that lineup's played very few minutes. I imagine that's when Middleton and Drew are both hurt. But if I take Connaughton and Portis and Forbes out and keep DiVincenzo and put Holiday and Middleton and PJ out there again, I think I'm getting better. I think that team can be really good. Again, I'm speculating as to what they could do with my man Peach, and obviously I got sneakers behind me and a Rockets jersey in the wall. I'm a pretty big Peach guy, but I do think that it could be interesting. But again, I'm kind of at the hot tea with an ice cube that Joe threw out there about the Jazz is I think they've got the talent. I need to see them do it. Budenholzer had the same criticism back in Atlanta, right? And so that's, I guess, where I'm at on them. Before we jump into our next segment, the next segment is called an open container. Once you pop the top off of your Yeti, anything can get in or out. Hot, cold, liquid, ice, anything. So our open container question, and I'm going to go one award at a time, which may prove tricky with technology, but we'll see, is who wins the end of seasons awards? We're about at the 2/3 to 3/4 mark, depending on how many teams you missed with protocols. So I'm going to start with Joe. Who wins the Sixth Man of the Year? Joe, you there? Jamal, who you got win the Sixth Man of the Year? Let's keep it rolling.
You got to go with Jordan Clarkson from Utah. The man has been playing on fire and like a man possessed because I think he realized during that Denver series that
who you got winning Sixth Man of the Year, Joe? Sorry.
Okay.
I'm gonna go with. Oh shit! Yeah. I'm having a brain fart. Was it? Oh my God. You would literally see the gears turning in my head with the smoke coming out of my ears right now. Was it Mike Conley?
Jamal was on a roll.
Is he the sixth man?
No, Jordan Clarkson. But Jamal was on the same boat with Utah. So, Jamal, tell us a little about Jordan Clarkson, what you got going.
Yeah, I mean, Jordan Clarkson has been on an absolute tear this year, and he gives Utah an option to really go small in most options. If you can play him, Mitchell, either Royce O'Neal or Ingles, and whatever other front court help you want to give Rudy Gobert, that's a very lethal lineup that you can put out there in case if you need buckets down the stretch or you just need to get back in the game. Jordan Clarkson can do that. I think he realized during the Denver series, right before Gary Harris came back, that hey, he can really take over a game if it's only for like a 5-6 minute spurt. So I really have to give it to Jordan Clarkson this year.
I'm on the Jordan Clarkson train too, I think. I think that's probably the only consensus award right now. And I think that's why I want to start with it is just like it's Jordan Clarkson. He's coming off the bench. He's dominating. He's shooting the ball well. He's playing good defense. And frankly, a lot of the other 6 Men of the Year candidates are having to start with because of injuries right now. like we're not going to give it to like a Kuzma. He's had to start too many games. So,
right.
Anyway, so I think that's the most consensus, obvious, easy one. One that I thought was easiest, obvious, consensus, easy one until I looked online and saw a lot of people arguing for other people is Defensive Player of the Year. And so, Joe, I'm going to try it one more time. Who do you have winning Defensive Player of the Year at this point?
Ben Simmons is looking really good. I know he's hit a little bit of a slump recently. I know he had a bad game the other day, but I think he's looking really good. He's playing defense really well. He knows. And I think Doc Rivers has done a good job of helping that team out just in general. I guess is different. And the personnel that they have around them is different this year as well. But yeah, Ben Simmons would probably be my pick.
So obviously Joe's a man after my own heart because I thought that was really obvious too. Jamal, do you agree or disagree?
I agree. Ben Simmons, I think, is one of the more underrated defenders we have in this league. You have a 6'10" guard/forward who can guard multiple positions, even the 5, able to move his feet, gets in the passing lanes, just can do almost anything. Matter of fact, I would have given him my vote last year for Defensive Player of the Year because he's that talented. And when he went down, right, either during or right before that Celtics series, I said Philadelphia has no chance when he went down.
Yeah, and I think that the last year would have been an interesting take giving him it last year because I think he's gotten better this year, which is why I think it makes it obvious. Again, he's 6'10" and change, 240 and change, and he can guard all 5 positions of the floor. You know, they're number 1 seed in the West. The number 1 seed in the East. Joel Embiid goes down. They don't miss a beat on defense. We all thought for the last couple of years Joel Embiid was Defensive Player of the Year candidate, right? And they don't skip a beat because Ben Simmons is covering everything. He's just a tremendous basketball player, and I maintain if you're getting stuck on this deal where he can't shoot threes, you win games with playing a guy like Ben Simmons on the floor. Even if you got to put shooters around him because he can't shoot, you win games with him. Other candidates, I will say it because we're all in consensus there. Is I think I'm seeing a lot of love for Rudy, and I think that's in part because it's like, how is Utah going to win all these games and get no awards out of this thing, right? Is Rudy a 3-time Defensive Player of the Year award winner? I look back at like the Hall of Fame, and you got like the only recent guy is Dwight Howard. Like, I'm trying to think of who makes it in that category. Maybe Giannis. There's a fair argument. Frankly, I think when Anthony Davis plays, he's got his own candidacy. But I saw a lot of people on Twitter not saying Ben Simmons, so that's why I was intrigued by this one. But I think it's Ben Simmons. I think there's this real NBA Twitter bias against him because he doesn't shoot the ball, and you know, if you're not good at it, I get why you don't do it. So one interesting thing here I want to go with is my conversation on Coach of the Year. So, Joe, because I want to see if how the delay is working. Joe, tell me about who you've got winning Coach of the Year at this point.
Honestly, with everything going on this season and all the issues, I think that Doc Rivers, to be honest, look at what Philly was. Obviously, they had injuries last season that led to them being kicked out of the bubble a lot earlier than they expected. But him coming in this season, and they started off the season hot, and they still look really good, still playing great basketball. They destroyed my C's the other day. As much as that hurts to say, but Philly's looking really good, and I think Doc Rivers has a lot to do with it.
Well, and I know that's one game that Celtics fans do not want to lose. There are some real rivals in the NBA. That's a real rivalry.
That's NBA history right there.
And
what are you gonna say?
There's very few games that you would want to lose in Boston.
Well, true. They've been
and
around.
Philly is one of them.
Yeah. So Jamal, I think it's he took the team at the
and
top
we do.
record.
Don't worry.
He took the team with the top record in the East right now. I think it's very natural to pick a team with the top record in his conference because, frankly, that means you're doing something right. Right? If you win a lot of games, you're doing something right. So who do you think is Coach of the Year right now? Are you going to stay at one of those top teams, or what are you looking at?
Yes, it is a top team, and I think it's a team that deserves a lot more love than it's getting. Monty Williams for Phoenix. The way that he has brought this franchise back from the depths. I mean, the last time they made the playoffs, Steve Nash was still in the league, 2010. And so they've gone basically 11 seasons without him, without making the playoffs or even making a scratch of noise within the West. So the fact, and it goes back to their running the bubble, going 8-0, and it wasn't like they were beating scrub teams. They were beating the Clippers, they were beating the Mavericks, they were beating some quality teams. And then they come in this year, you bring in Chris Paul, you bring in Jay Crowder, and you bring in a whole new system, and it's worked to perfection. So Monty Williams, I think, really needs to have his name as far as the top guy for Coach of the Year, because I don't think that they would be the 2 seed in the West without his guidance and Chris Paul's leadership.
Completely. So I would say in the same vein as we're talking about 1 and 2, we got Jeremy tagging in. Can Chris Paul win Coach of the Year? Only if LeBron James can win Executive of the Year for playing Anthony Davis retroactively.
Yes.
No, I think it's worth asking. You know, these top teams, Philly, and you brought up Phoenix and Monty. You know, Quinn Snyder will probably get votes because of what they're doing in Utah. I don't think Steve Nash and Brooklyn get any because they look talent loaded, or, you know, I think there's a lot of people saying just roll the ball, run double drag. You got D'Antoni as your assistant coach. Let him play, right? Like, I don't know how much people give credit to Steve Nash. You know, just to be devil's advocate here, if the Clippers, who are only a couple games behind the Suns right now, if they were to pass them up and move into the second spot, you know, you got to at least look at Ty Lue a little bit.
Yeah, I agree.
The guy hasn't coached in a lot of seasons. He's always had really good teams, but they have always won. And I'd maintain there are plenty of coaches that have had really good teams and not won a lot. But I don't know if that happens. I like Monty a lot because I think with how young that team is, like you point out, Jamaal, that's a lot of work on a coach or on, you know, Chris Paul, as Jeremy pointed out. I also think that I'm glad that Doc was brought up because I kind of think Doc got a raw deal a year ago. I wouldn't be mad at any of those. I might be mad at Quinn Snyder, but I would understand the pick.
To me, I'm a little bit cold on the Quinn Snyder pick, only for the reason that Utah has made the playoffs the last 4 or 5 years. So I can't really give that to him because his teams, for the most part, they've been competitive. So that's why I was leaning more towards Phoenix, because when's the last time we really heard the Phoenix Suns in NBA circles?
It's been since CNN. I think it's funny. You're a Denver guy. You brought the West Coast team. Joe's an East Coast guy. Boston. He brought up the East Conference team. So I think we're well represented. I'll say. The big conversation, and this may get back to the East Coast, West Coast, is the MVP. It feels like every time we hype up a candidate as a NBA Twitter sphere, said candidate rolls an ankle or pulls a hammy or something. So I hope we don't jinx anybody. But I'm going to start with Joe again because that's been working better on the delay. So, Joe, who wins the MVP to you?
Well, at first, it was going to be Embiid's to lose, but then he hyperextends his knee. Unfortunate, but very lucky that it was only a hyperextension. So I think right now it's Joker's award to lose. He's playing amazing. He's playing like a taller Larry Bird right now. It's insane. And yeah, I just think it's his award. You might as well just give it to him already.
So the Bostonian says he's a taller Larry Bird, which is a fun comp.
Yeah.
Jamaal, I know who you're going to say, but I'm going to ask you the question: who wins the MVP?
Would you think it was going to be any different? I mean, come on. It has to be Joker, because look, the man is leading his team. Denver, as bad as the slow start was their season, they're finally starting to pick it up. And I keep saying to people, that trade for Aaron Gordon has changed everything, because now you got a stretch four who's able to guard the multiple the versatile wings that you're going to have in the West, and then you still got Murray who's picking up his play, but it starts and ends with Joker, and the fact that he basically touches the ball almost every single time, and I keep telling people, you have a 7-footer who can pass like a Chris Paul, like a Steve Nash. I've almost never seen that before. And with the numbers he's putting up right now, and Denver keeps climbing up in the Western standings, you'd be hard pressed not to go with him. I will say, Damian Lillard and Giannis, they should get certain consideration. I really have to give it to Dame a lot because playing without two of his best stars for most of the season, and now to have those guys coming back, it'll be interesting what they do. But yeah, my pick is Joker. It's a no-brainer.
I don't want to pump you up too much. I think the last time we were on together, Jamal, I said the deal will be if one of those two guys between Dame Lillard and Nikola Jokic starts winning games, they're going to help because they were both putting up crazy stat lines early in year two. This is not like they just started putting up crazy stat lines, right? I mean, Joker's almost averaging a triple-double as 7-footer. And the deal is the dimes are like eye-popping, right? It's not just, it's also like aesthetically really fun to watch. If Dame were to go on a hot streak and the Blazers win a bunch of games and pass them, I'd probably go there too. I think the awesome thing about the Gordon trade for the MVP conversation is it is a great trade for Denver, is a great trade for Jokic, is a great trade for his MVP case, but it's not too good a trade, right? It's not like they went out and got AD, they went out and got James Harden, they didn't go out and get the megastar.
They didn't need to.
Well, but the conversation then becomes, well, of course they're winning more games. They added all NBA. So they went out and added Aaron Gordon, right? Who is a great fit. He looks like he's fitting in great, like early, but I would have said schematically as a guy in guard 2 through 4, play a small ball 5, back cut off the Jokic patch. Like he can do a lot of things that complement Joker, but he's not so good that we're sitting here saying, well, now it's unfair. He got too much help, right? I think that was a great move. We talked in the trade recap, the trade deadline recap episode a couple weeks ago about how great a move that was for them. So I don't mean to rehash all that, but I think that's a great trade for his MVP case as well. I think the real shame here, and you mentioned Giannis, is if Giannis does not win the 2019 MVP, right? There was a tight race to him and Harden. Harden had 35 a game. Giannis was all this, like best record in the league, all that kind of stuff, right? If he doesn't win the 2019 MVP and he's just a one-time MVP winner, I don't know that there's this big resistance to give him the award this year.
I agree.
Now, I will say that if I look at the East and Western Conference, the Bucks do not have a whole lot different resume than the Nuggets do, and so it may be a conversation between him and Joker. But there's this big thing about like Giannis can't win 3 MVPs, right? Like you got to win a championship for that third MVP. For whatever reason, that seems to be a thing we hold on to, and it's weird, and I don't know how to explain it, but like we hold the previous postseasons against a guy for a regular season award.
Mm-hmm.
And I maintain that if Giannis doesn't win it in 19, there's no consideration because statistically he's probably playing a little bit better than when he won it last year. The Bucks aren't winning as many games, but again, like individually speaking, they're winning plenty of games. He's probably playing better. His statistics indicate it's a little bit of a bump, and I think that's intriguing to say, like, but we're not going to give him the award if we can't give it to a guy 3 times in a row. Because you look at the guys that have won 3 MVPs, it's your LeBron James. LeBron James has 4. Jordan has 5. Like, is he in that category of a guy? And I think the big hesitation is it's like, well, those guys were champions, so he can't be him yet. And it's like, okay, so I guess the next guy's Joker because Joker's going to get his one. And there's a lot of one-off MVPs across the board that no one's got problems with. So Joker's playing great. It's his turn. We're all in consensus across the, with the exception of Coach of the Year, we went East Coast, West Coast a little bit, but it seems like we're all fairly consensus actually in the awards, which is not quite as, we'll say, NBA Twitter-like as I thought that was going to be, because I thought on Twitter people still arguing about these things. So maybe Twitter just needs to catch up. What I will say is my last hot tea cold brew was a late edition after some announcements this weekend. Space Jam 2 dropped a trailer over the weekend. Space Jam 2, it looks like the premise is LeBron James's kid gets abducted or something, and he's now got to go play the aliens for, it looks like his kid back, which is a little bit darker than the Monstars thing was, until the Monstar thing became about quasi-slavery. I don't know. The commercial came out, and it started a big stir on social media, in large part because LeBron James is the main character, and then everyone was trying to look at in the commercial which of the Monstars type aliens compares to what character. Like there's a character that he's like built out of gold and he's got a clock on his shoulder. Everyone's assuming that looks like Dame Lillard in the face. There's a character with a big unibrow. People are saying that looks like Anthony Davis. There's a wet character that lights himself on fire. And I thought that was clever because apparently that is Klay Thompson. Splash Bro catches fire. Thought that was fun. And then the evil-looking woman has a long, pointy nose, which I think is a shot at Diana Taurasi, which is hilarious. And so I think it was fun to see all those people shake out. I'm still looking to see who the Bill Murray type character is. So, Joe, hot tea, cold brew. What do you think about the Space Jam 2 trailer?
I like the trailer. The storyline is a little dark, but I'm excited to see it. It's not going to hold a candle to the MJ Space Jam. I'm saying that right now. Remakes are never better. Excited to see what the story has in store.
Gotcha. Jamal, your first take on the trailer. Hot tea. Brew.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing it. And as a matter of fact, when I spoke on another podcast a while back, and they say if it was going to affect LeBron James' Lakers, I'm like, look, I'm just going there to watch a movie. It's good. I'm serious. Like, because I'm not concerned about his legacy. I'm not concerned about all that stuff. I just want to see if this movie. I personally don't think it's going to measure up to the first Space Jam, but still, as a movie guy. As just an objective observer, I'm just going to go watch and go see what happens because I think the storyline, should be very interesting because I know a lot of times that we see a lot of plot points that are kind of the same. I think I might like this one better because it's different. It's going in a new direction than the old one. So I'm really looking forward to see what they do with this one.
I will say it's interesting. It's Space Jam 2, a new journey or a new odyssey, something along those lines. It's not a sequel, though. Like, it's not like the Monstars came back and we need to play another basketball game, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's interesting because I think that sets it up for more success than if they try to do a true sequel. It's funny because I don't have any indication besides the movie Space Jam that Michael Jordan would be better at acting. Frankly, aside from the movie Space Jam, I kind of think LeBron James would be better at acting. However, I will say, as I look at it, I kind of think LeBron's going to be corny. Like I just have this feeling that like LeBron's going to be a little bit of a cheeseball. He moved to LA to get this whole thing going, and Jordan wasn't that cheesy. Worth pointing out, comes up in the chat, Durant is currently perfect from the field as the Nets are up by 32 on the New Orleans Pelicans. Hopefully we can get whatever that doctor is to help me with my retired athlete knees and back. But what I will say is that's wild. So it looks like as I pull this up, the statistics for the game up, Kevin Durant is where'd it go? Oh, no. He is a perfect 5 for 5 from the field, 2 of 2 from 3. The biggest thing to me was he still looked fluid when he went out there to start. I want to jump into our last bit. The long two is a new segment as of a couple weeks ago. A mid-range jump shot is a long two-pointer. It's hated by some analytics nerds. Shout out to Daryl Morey. But a long two-pointer seems silly. It's a low percentage as a 3, but it's worth just 2/3 the points of a 3. But to us, it's our shot. So my shot for you all is Joe and then Jamal, because that's been the way the technology's worked out the best. Joe, who are 2 players that really impressed you in March Madness?
Well, I'm going to go with Jalen Suggs as my first one. And both of mine are going to be from Gonzaga. But Jalen Suggs is my first one just because of solely because of the shot in the UCLA game. That takes a lot of guts and courage. And just the fact that he was willing to pull up. Obviously, there wasn't much time to make another decision, but like just the quick thinking that he had to make that decision. And then the way that he celebrated, it's just like he was meant for that moment.
Right.
And then my second player is Timmy, just because he's electric. I mean, his thing with the mustache, where anytime he made like a big play, he just did the whole like play with the stash. That was just, I don't know. Something about the Gonzaga players, they're just ready to be electric in the league. You know what I mean? They're going to be characters.
Yeah. Well, and between the mustache and he's a big, clunky white guy with good feet and good hands, like something about Drew Timme feels old school. It's wild.
Why?
I remember.
Yep,
I mean,
something about
obviously,
Kevin McHale.
Something about Kevin McHale. I live and teach and coach in Dallas is my day job, and we had to coach against Drew Timme at Richardson Pierce. He was a sophomore or junior a couple years back. He has gotten a lot. He was really good then, and he's gotten a lot better. And I'll leave it at that because I was like, oh, like mid-major, that sounds right. And then I'm like, oh, this dude's taking over the NCAA tournament. Like, oh, okay. So shout out Drew Timme there. But a good couple guys, good energetic couple guys, and frankly, while Gonzaga did not have the showing they wanted in the final, I'd argue that Suggs and Timme still played, with the exception of the start of the game, fairly well, right? Yeah. Jamaal, who are your two?
So my two, I'm going to start with the first one, and they were, as everybody knows, the darlings of the NCAA tournament. That kid from Oral Roberts, Amos, I believe his name is. That kid has some heart. The leading scorer in the NCAA tournament, and the show he put on along with his team to knock off Ohio State, then to do the same to Florida, and to come so close to doing the same to Arkansas. They just put on a show that I will remember for a long time, and I hope he comes back next year and does the same thing because I love his game and his courage. And the second player, and I just love his energy right throughout, all the way up to the final game, Davion Mitchell. And I want to put him, Butler, and T as just one person, but I can't do that. But his energy was so infectious. It went on to the entire team. You definitely saw on the defensive end because I know a couple possessions in the title game where he took on Jalen Suggs. It's like you still a freshman. Like I'm taking on you, nothing to me. So and I love guys who have that kind of edge to them, who says that no matter what happens, you're gonna deal with me all night. So those were the two players that really caught my eye during this tournament. And to see Baylor do what they did in that title game was impressive.
Definitely. I would only add, because I wouldn't take away from any of those four guys.
I think you're going to see a lot more basketball teams lifting with the football team.
Yeah, a lot more basketball teams lifting the football team. Speaking of which, can we get Mark Vital, the big man in Baylor with the neck that stuck up? Can we get him a tight end contract somewhere? That guy looked like a pro. He looked like, speaking of lifting with the football team, he should be playing with the football team. He looked like he was in the wrong game.
They did live with the football team now.
I could for real, like the way that Antonio Gates played college basketball and then went out and played football, like that guy could go do that. He had great hands, big, strong, fast. The names I would throw in that it's not because I wouldn't pick the names you guys also said. Johnny Juzang and UCLA. Shout out to them because frankly, it looked like he had almost the shot, and then they called a charge at the end of regulation. And then he had the shot to tie out to force. It was the right call. I'm not mad about it, but like it looked like he kind of had the shot, and then he had the tie it up shot right before the Jalen Suggs shot. That again, like he had to like hustle for his own board on that. Like Johnny Juzang had a great tournament. Frankly, it looked like to me it was very clear that if UCLA had not had a COVID, scuffle in the middle of the season, they might not have been an 11 seed. They are UCLA. They are blue blood. Evan Mobley across town at USC. He only played a couple rounds, but he had a pretty good showing. I'm really hoping the Rockets grab a guy like that. And then I had a backup because I was wondering if y'all were going to take one of mine. Javon Quinterly from Alabama can stroke it. That's a pro shooter.
That man got game. He's got game.
Pro shooter at Alabama. I hope he does more than just shooting as a league because he can do more than that at Alabama.
Don't let Kevin hear you talking good about Alabama.
Yeah. Oh, I probably got to stop before Kev hears. But no, I think the deal is not very often that we talk about Alabama basketball. So shout out Javon clearly. But those, again, I had a backup in case y'all took one of mine. Last but not least, if I were to do Wednesday Night Rice, do y'all have anything you want to dive into right past about anything written or read lately?
Nothing really comes to mind for me. It's not this week, at least.
You got anything, Joe?
Yeah, no, not this week.
Obviously,
no.
I'm writing a little bit each week. Go ahead and look us up on bellyupsports.com. One thing I'm recommending reading to people that are trying to get to like, so obviously people are like, well, what do you watch when you watch basketball? I'm like, well, you should watch the 4 to 9 guys that don't have the ball on the floor because you always see the guy with the ball anyway, right? And those kind of basic things. A guy named Nikias Duncan or at Nikias NBA on Twitter has kind of become a must follow for a lot of NBA Twitter. He's writing a weekly report called Roaming the Baseline, where he basically like outlines a bunch of stuff he's noticing, including he has access to like the film. So he pulls up game clips of college and pro sets. It's a really, really good read. I also point out that he has a whole list of other things he's reading. So if you're like wanting to read a lot about basketball, he does that. I would plug any of the stuff we're doing on Belly Up. Like I put a whole Rockets roundup this week out, looking at what kind of draft prospects we got because that's all we're looking forward to. I also did a whole bit asking Paul Pierce, if you can hear this, come join the Belly Up Sports crew. I found a new podcast this week called Spinsters. It's Halo Shaughnessy and other woman's name escapes me at the moment because I'm on the spot, but it's 2 women talking about basketball. This week's episode, they talk about like the Texas team, San Antonio, Houston, and Dallas, which is how I got to it. And they interviewed Shea Serrano about San Antonio, but they got a good vibe. I recommend Spinsters to people trying to find something to listen to. But that means it is time for the buzzer beater. Now, the buzzer beater is a chance for us to use 24 seconds, which is an NBA shot clock, to get off a take. I got to be honest, it's going to be tricky with Joe's tech and lagging, but we can work with what we got. So, Joe, are you ready for a buzzer beater? I'm going to start it when I hear your voice. All right, Joe, I'm going to count you down. And when I hear your voice, I am going to go. Ready? 3, 2, 1, go, Joe. All right, I can't hear anything out of Joe, and I gave him a second. Jamaal, do you have a buzzer beater ready?
I do. I have one.
All right. I'm going to count you down. 3, 2, 1, Jamaal.
So with the NBA playoffs really around the corner, I think it's really important to note that getting the 1 seed in either conference is huge because most throughout history, whenever you get the 1 seed, your chance to go to the finals goes up at the very least 65%. So that 1 seed is more important than you think.
Dang, you got all the time to spare. All right. Jamal's really good at this. If you're paying attention, keep track at home. I don't think he's ever got beat by the buzzer. All right. Here we go. I'm always a little too long-winded.
I just want to say that the 25 under 25 we edited. If you look at the season predictions that we put out at the beginning of the season, I picked him to be Rookie of the Year.
I lost you, but Joe, we're talking something about 25 on. I'll take the timer off, Joe. What are you saying about 25 under 25? What's your buzzer beater? All right, we're really behind with Joe here. So I'm going to get going on my buzzer beater. I am a little long-winded. I'm not quite as good at this as Jamal is, but we're going to get started. All right, ready, set, go. All right, so here's my buzzer beater. The WNBA has a massive jersey drop tomorrow. Nike is giving them each individual jerseys that have something to do with their teams and has something to do with their cities. Here's the deal. Nike fumbled the bag here. WNBA fumbled the bag here. They've been leaking for weeks now, and it has not been orchestrated. It's not intentional enough looking, but it's not unintentional enough either. It's a big, big mess up, and they're going to be really cool. Go get a jersey from WNBA store. Anyway, All right. So happens to me every time. I think I got the crux of it out there, though. All right, Joe, if you can hear me, will you give your social media info where people can find you to hear your take on things like the 25 under 25? Joe? All right, Jamaal, where can people find you at? We'll put Joe's stuff in the video comments on YouTube or in the video description on YouTube so you can find him there if you need him. Jamaal, where can people find you?
So you can find me on Twitter. You can find me on Facebook. On Twitter, it's Jamaal at Jamaal Simmons. Facebook is my regular name. I'm trying to also work on my Instagram as well. I'm trying to upload more stuff there. So I'm pretty easy to find.
For sure. And then, Joe, you there? All right. You can find me on
any socials at Joe Palencia 13. Mainly on Twitter. It's always on my screen. Never my screen. Like I promise you, I'm always on Twitter.
So if you couldn't hear it because we're having technical difficulties, Joe is at Joe Palencia 13. Again, we're gonna put all our socials in the description on YouTube, so don't worry about that. But you find him at Joe Palencia 13. My personal stuff is always at Ainsworth 512. That's at PAINSWORTH 512, like Parker Ainsworth, Ainsworth 512. And then we have this show's Twitter I run a different show's Twitter and Instagram as well. That's at FN Sports 2. It's FINSPORTS 2. We have a show that comes out every Monday morning where it's myself and another teacher, Shaka, who commented here, who knows I hate asterisks, commented about that. But Shaka and I do a show every Monday called FN Sports. We're two teachers grading sports topics. And then the Midweek Midrange is at Midweek Midrange on Twitter and Instagram. And then we have a YouTube channel, the Midweek Midrange. You can find us on there too. Be sure to like, subscribe, and download. We're working to get this kind of stuff audio available too on all your Spotify's and Apple Podcasts. So that should be coming in the coming days. But thank y'all for tuning in to the Midweek Midrange. And be sure you're not afraid to pull up. Thanks for coming by.